Salvete omnes! Hello everyone. Today we're continuing the read-through through the Voyage of St. Brendan, and today we are on Chapter 6, The Empty Court, Aula, Vacua. So in the previous chapter they had just finished building their boat and were just about to set out for a trip into the ocean when three other monks joined them, demanded to come along with the trip, and St. Brendan warned them that one of them would have a good fate and two of them would enter into judgment, which the setup for that is in this chapter, for what happens to one of the monks who is judged. So, ascendit Sanctus Brendanus in navem, so St. Brendan ascended into the boat, extensisque velis, and, having extended the sails, they began to sail contra solstitium aestivale, against the summer solstice. I put a footnote there. The meaning of this is unclear. I consulted a couple commentaries. They suggested west or north as being what toward the summer solstice means. So we're not quite sure. Apparently the monk who wrote this thought it was clear. Perhaps it was a more common sailing term amongst the seafaring Irish around that period of time. Autem, habebant prosperum ventum, they had a prosperous wind, nihil fuit is opus, so nothing was to them work to sail, except to hold the sail. So they don't have to do anything, they don't have to row, because they've got a prosperous wind. They just have to hold the sail, meaning keep the sail upright so it's catching the wind and that sort of thing. Post quindecim vero dies que savit ventus. So, however, after 15 days, the wind ceased. Et coeperunt, and they began to row usque dum vires eorum defecarunt, until their strengths lacked, or their strengths gave out. A couple notes here. Navigare can mean, well, it typically means to sail, like you sail a boat. Sometimes it means to row, and sometimes it's very clear from context in this work in particular that it means to row. And this would be the case. They've already been sailing, so when it says they began to navigare, it means they began to row. The second thing to watch out for is vires. You might think, oh, that comes from vir, meaning man. If it was, it'd be viros or viri. Vires comes from vis, meaning strength. So until their strengths gave out. Confestum sanctus Brendanus coepit iros confitare atque amonare. So at once St. Brendan began to comfort them and like to admonish them or to warn them. You may know the word monere, to warn, saying, fratis nolite formidare, brothers, do not be afraid, for, inem, Deus est noster adiutor. So God is our, adiutor is like I think I gloss it down here as our helper, our assistant. And so God is our helper and like our sailor and our governor, meaning the person who steers the boat, and our rudder, our guberna. Mitite intus omnes remiges et gubernam. So put inside all of the oars and the rudder. Tantum dimitite vela extensa. Only leave, imperative there, the sail extended. Et facia Deus, and God, this is subjunctive, so let God do just as he will with his servants and with his boat. So they're rowing really hard, and St. Brendan says, let's not do this. Just put the oars and the rudder in the boat, put up the sail, and God will guide this boat wherever it needs to go. This is a pretty common trope within the Nāvigātiō. Reificiebant autem semper ad vesperam. So they were like dining, they were eating, they were refreshing their bodies, always in the evening. Aliquando vintum habebant. So sometimes they had a wind. Tamen, however, they were ignorant, or they did not know out of which part it was coming, or into which part the ship was being carried. We've got passive there. Consumatis iam quadraginta diebus. So having consumed then 40 days, et omnibus dispindiis quae ad victum pertinebant. So not only have the 40 days been consumed, but also all the supplies which pertain to victum. So like to, in English, we've got the word victuals, which is like rations. So they've spent 40 days, they're out of food. Apparuit illis quaedam insula. So a certain island appeared to them, ex parte septentrionali, out of the northern part, Valde saxosa et alta, very rocky and tall. Cum autem appropinquasent ad litus irius. So having had approached to the shore of that, meaning the island, they saw viderunt ripam altissimum sicut murum. So they saw a very tall shore like a wall, et diversos rivulos descendentes de sumitati insula fluentes in mare. So here we've got two participles, descending and flowing. And this is in the accusative, right? Because they saw the tall shore like a wall, and they saw diverse rivulets or diverse streams descending from the top of the island flowing into the sea. Tamen, however, they were not able to, they weren't able to, minime poterant, invenire portum, they weren't able to find a port where they could like anchor the ship, or where the ship could stand. The subjunctive is used. I'm not sure. I might have to change that. No. It's not really used to express doubt here. It's just to say where they... I think it's because it's part of a clause there. Anyhow, the brothers, however, frateres enim, vexati erunt, had been vexed greatly, very, very much, with hunger and thirst. Singly, so each one, a caputant, took up vascula, so like vessels for like putting water in, ut aliquid de aqua potuissent sumere, so that they might take something of the water. So the monks who are sailing see these rivulets of water coming off the island. They're out of water, so they decide, well, we're going to grab some of that water so we can drink, because they're thirsty. And then we get to one of the stranger parts of the Nāvigātiō. Right here. So Sanctus Brendanus, cum haec vidicet. So St. Brendan, when he had seen these things, plural neuter accusative there, said, Nolite facere, don't do it. Stultum est inem quod agitis. So it is stupid. So inem, for, it is stupid, that which you do. From agere there. Quando, when God, Deus, non vult nobis estendere portum intrandi, when God does not want to show to us a port for entry, we've got intrandi, which is a genitive gerund there. And you want to make rapinum, which is robbery. This idea of like they're snatching something that's not theirs. They're just going to reach out and take the water, even though they apparently haven't been given permission. That's what's strange to me about this, is the water's flowing off an island, and it's flowing into the sea, and the sea is salty. So the water is going to lose its value anyhow, which makes me think that this has to have a symbolic meaning, because it doesn't really make sense on a historical level why they can't take the water. but I have to admit I haven't quite figured out what the precise meaning of that is. Perhaps the water has something to do with this idea of like a spirit flowing forth from something, and because they haven't, gotten permission to the island, they shouldn't try to like take things from the effects of the island. We've got some images like this in scripture where like in John chapter 4, if I recall, when Jesus is talking with the woman at the well, he talks about how if you drink the true water that gives eternal life, the Spirit of God will well up in you like a fountain. I think I just butchered that quote. Go read it in John 4. So perhaps they're getting at something like that. We do see elsewhere in the Nāvigātiō where they're not allowed to enter an island until like Brendan gets off the boat and like finds whatever monk lives on the island and asks for permission. So perhaps this has something to do with like monastic relations. Anyhow, we'll move on. Dominus Jesus Christus, Lord Jesus Christ, will show, we've got the future there, to his servants, after 3 days, a port or a harbor and a place of remaining, from manere, to remain. This is also a genitive gerund. Ut reficiantur corpora vexatorum, so that your vexed bodies might be refreshed. So cum autem circu irant per 3 dies illam insulam. So, however, having gone around for 3 days, that island, on the 3rd day, tertia die, ablative, circa orum nonum, so around the 9th hour, invenerunt portum ubi erat aditus unius navis. They found a harbor where there was an entrance of one ship. So this is another instance of that idea of something only being big enough for one boat that we saw back in the chapter where Brendan put up a tent that was just big enough for the boat they were building. Note also the time span here. It's 3 days, which seems to be a symbolic number. For example, Christ gave the sign of Jonah that he would be resurrected on the 3rd day. So in the same way, they go around the island for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, they're able to find a harbor where they'll be saved. Et statim serexit. And immediately, Saint Brendan, Sanctus Brendanus serexit, got up and blessed the entrance. And here, benedixit, so dixit would be he said. Benedixit is just he said well, which means he blessed. It's its own word that comes from bene and dicere. Erat namque Petra incisa, ex utraque parte mirae altitudines sicut miras. There was an incised rock on either side of great altitude or great height, like a wall. So there's this idea of the Petra incisa, the rock that's cleft. And I think there's symbolic meaning to this as well. Because in the Old Testament, the Israelites are in slavery in Egypt, and Moses leads them out, and they cross the Red Sea, and they're in the middle of the wilderness, and they don't have any water. And one of the things that Moses does is he takes his staff and he strikes a rock, and the water pours forth from the rock miraculously. So I think they're getting into that idea of like the rock that's cleft giving forth water, because the circumstance is the same, right? The Israelites were in the wilderness. They were starting to grumble against God because of their thirst. And then Moses was able to do a miracle, and water poured forth from the rock for them. In the same way, Brendan's monks weren't grumbling, but they were thinking about getting water by other means, by just grabbing it from the island. But what does Brendan do? He also tells them, in 3 days we'll find a harbor, and they find this split rock, this cleft rock where the water comes out. This is also a symbol of Christ. In the book of Daniel, Daniel is a prophet who sees this vision of this statue made up of 4 different substances, and the 4 substances stand for different kingdoms of the world, where one is like the, if I recall correctly, the Assyrians, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, and then the Romans. And then he sees a rock cut by no human hand that knocks down the statue, and it grows and fills the whole earth. And the Christian interpretation of the prophecy of Daniel as well, those are the 4 human kingdoms. And then during the Roman imperial period, Christ, who's the rock not cut by any human hand, he's the Son of God who takes upon human flesh, comes and he topples those human kingdoms, and then his own kingdom grows and takes over the world. For example, when the Christian seize control of Rome in around 318 AD. So I think that's why this detail is given of the cleft rock. We move on. Cum vero, omnes ascendisit de nave et statissent foris in terra. So with everyone having ascended out of the boat and having stood outside on the ground. So sometimes statissent is use of the boat to talk about the boat anchoring, but here the people are standing outside in the ground. Praecepit sanctus Brendanus, ut nihil de superlectili tulicent de nava foris. So St. Brendan orders that nothing of the superlecti is to be taken outside of the boat. And we look at superlecti, and it's like furniture, house, or furnishing, paraphernalia, if you will, articles necessary for business. It's from superlex, superlectilis. So basically he's telling them, don't unload the boat. Don't take anything out of the boat. And why is he ordering this? Well, because they're going to find a place that's already furnished for them. Poro ambulantibus peripas mares. So further, poro, walking through the beach of the sea. Occurrit illis canis. So a dog ran to them through a certain path. Et venit ad pedes sancti Brendani. And he came to the feet of St. Brendan, sicut solent canes venire ad pedes dominorum suorum. So just as dogs, canes, are accustomed, solent, to come to the feet of their masters, tunc sanctus Brendanus dixit fratribus suis. Then St. Brendan said to his brothers, Nonne bonum nuntium donavit nobis Deus. So, has not God given, donavit, this is where we get the word donation from, given to us a good, I guess you could say messenger. Let's see, I glossed it as, messenger from nuntius, meaning the dog's the messenger. Sequimini eum, so follow him. Tunc sanctus Brendanus cum fratribus suis secuti sunt canem usque opido. So then St. Brendan, with his brothers, followed secuti sunt. So sequor is definite. So to say they followed, they have to use this type of construction. They followed the dog until the town. Apparently there's a town on the island. Intrantibus autem opidum. So having entered the town, they saw, viderunt, alum magnum extratum lectulis et sederibus, aquumque ad pedes lavandus. So they saw a great hall, or a great courtroom, extratum lectulis, and beds that are laid out, and seats, et sederibus. Modifies stratum there. let's go to the vocab word. Yeah, so laid out. Yeah, so it's saying the court is laid out with seats and with beds. So to put it all together, they saw a great court and implied the court was laid out with beds and with chairs. And there was water for washing feet. So we've got the accusative gerund there, for washing feet. Cum autem raisidesen, so having sat down, praecipit sanctus Brendanus suis sociis, so Saint Brendan ordered his associates, saying, Cavete fratres, so beware, brothers, ne Satanas perducat vos in temptationem. So beware, brothers, lest Satan should lead you into temptation. Video irum suadintum, unum extrebus fratrebus. So I see that one, meaning the devil, and he's suadintum, which is like persuading cleverly. You can think of like someone who's very suave might be good at like talking someone into something. So he sees the devil persuading one of the three brothers, qui post nos venerunt de nostro monasterio, so who came after us out of our monastery, de furto pessimo, of very bad theft. So one of those three people who joined late, the devil is trying to persuade to steal something. Orate pro anima ius, so pray for his spirit. Nam caro ius tradita est in potestatum satanae. So for his flesh has been given into the power of Satan. And by flesh here, they mean like the, you could say like the appetites. He's been given over to temptation. He's feeling this temptation. He's being tempted by Satan. Illa domus in qua residibant, so that house in which they were residing, erat quasi incerta per parietas, in circuitu de appendentibus fasculis diversi generis metalli, frenis et cornibus circumdatis argento. So this is perhaps the most difficult to interpret thing in the book, in my opinion. So that house in which they're residing was like it was introduced through walls, was the best kind of translation I could get all around. The rest of it's pretty easy. Of hanging vessels of diverse types of metals. So we've got these phrenes, the bridles and horns, gilded with silver. So I think what this sentence is getting about is that all the walls had these decorations of these metal bridles and cornibus and horns. I think this is the idea of like a medieval hall with like, swords and armor and that kind of thing hanging in the wall. I think that's what's going on here, except it's medieval Ireland. One commentary suggested that the bridle here could mean like an ornamental necklace, which makes more sense than someone hanging up like a horse bridle. Because why would you put that on the wall, and why would someone want to steal it? So it seems like it's this ornamental necklace that perhaps denotes like status. So they're in this like fancy like medieval courtroom kind of thing. We move on. Tunc sanctus Brendanus dixit ministro suo. So then Saint Brendan said to his minister, qui solebant panem apponere fratibus, who was accustomed to place bread before the brothers. So that explains who the minister is. It's just one of the monks whose job it is to set out bread before the brothers. And so, fer prandium quod nobis Deus misit. So bring, fer, the breakfast or the lunch, which God gave to us, nobis. Qui, who, meaning the minister, statum sedexit, got up at once, and he found mensam positam, a set table, et lintiamina, et panes singulos miri candoris et piscis. So lintia mina is like the linen napkins. We might have a word like liniments. I might be making that up. It's the linen like place settings for the table. Panes singulos, so bread for each one of marvelous like whiteness, and fish. So they're in this like fancy hall. It's nicely decorated. The table's already set. They've got like the linen napkins and everything. And they've got fish and this bread of marvelous whiteness. So this is reminiscent, the bread and fish, of the time that Jesus fed the 4,000, if I recall the number correctly, where what does he feed them with? He feeds them with bread and fish. So I think this is a callback to that. And it's also likely the diet of Irish monks, especially the seafaring ones, that they would live off of bread and fish. Cum alata fuisint omnia. So with everything having been alata, carried, so everything having been like carried out, benedixit Sanctus Brendanus Prandium, Saint Brendan blessed the meal and said to his brothers, qui dat escum omne cane confite mini deo caeli. And this is a reference to a psalm: give praise to God who gives food to all flesh. Confiteor usually means to confess. Here it's got a special ecclesiastical meaning. And if you want to read the rest of the psalm, it's there for you. Residebant igitur fratres et magnificabant Deum. So the brothers therefore seated themselves and were glorifying God. Similitur depotu quantum volebant. So similarly of drink as much as they wanted. So they've got this great meal with bread, and they've also got things to drink. Perhaps this is alcohol. I'm not certain. It might be water. We're not told. Finita iam cena. I mean, wine would make sense to fit the motif of like food that God gives us, because the Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper, if you think back to the Last Supper in the Gospel accounts, Jesus takes the bread and dips it in wine and gives it to his disciples. So it would make sense if the drink here was wine. It would fit with the motif. So finita iam cena, so having finished dinner, et opus Dei per finitum, and having performed or finished the work of God. This appears to be some sort of religious rite that the monks would engage in. Dixit praedictus vir. So the aforesaid praedictus man said. Praedictus vir here is St. Brendan. So the aforesaid man said, Requiscite ecce singula lectula et bene strata. So here it's like, take rest, behold, a bed for each one, and the bed is well set out. Opus est vobis ut repausetis membra vestra ex labore nimio navigi vestri. So it is necessary, opus est, to you, to rest your members. And membra vestra here is neuter plural accusative, again. Out of your excessive labor. So nimis is too much. Nimio is the ablative there to go with labor. So out of too much labor of your rowing. So cum autem fratres ob dormisent. So while the brothers were sleeping, Sanctus Brendanus, St. Brendan sees or saw the work of the devil. An Ethiopian infant having a bridle in his hand, habentem frenum in manu, et iocantum ante fraterum praedictum. So this might strike you as a very strange sentence, because randomly there's an Ethiopian infant. So the reason they use the phrase infantum Ethiopium is this just idea that there's like a very dark colored man. I don't think what they're getting across is that like this person literally looks like an Ethiopian baby. I think what it's saying is just there's a very dark man, which is often used to portray the devil. You know, the prince of darkness taking on a physically dark body. I really don't think there's anything racial meant by this. It's Irish monks writing in like the 700s. We also see this idea in the Life of Anthony by Athanasius, where at one point the devil appears to Saint Anthony as a black boy. So, habitum frenum in mano. So, having a bridle in his hand. And remember, the bridle might be like an ornamental necklace or some sort of like ceremonial decoration. Et iocantum ante fraterum praedictum. So, iocantum's a participle there, and joking, or jesting, or he's taunting before the aforesaid brother. So the aforesaid brother here is the one that Brendan said we need to pray for him because his flesh is given over to the power of the devil. So the work of the devil here is this demon who appears as like this small black child who is in the middle of the night like tempting this brother to steal a necklace. So statum sanctus Brendanus serexit et coepit orare. So at once St. Brendan got up and began to pray. Per noctans usque ad diem, all through the night until day. So perhaps St. Brendan saw this scene of like the demon tempting the guy in a dream and then woke up and began to pray. Perhaps he was already praying and like kind of saw this in his mind's eye, if you will. Perhaps he was lying in bed and literally saw a demon in front of like one of the other beds. We're not told. Iam veromane, however, in the morning, or now in the morning, cum fratres ad opus Dei festinascent, when the brothers hasten to the work of God. So here, this would appear to be another religious rite that they're doing, perhaps saying a mass, or taking the Eucharist, that is the Lord's Supper. Ut post hoc iter regisint et navem, so that after this they might take a trip to the boat. Ecce apparuit mensa parata sicut et peridie. Behold, there appeared, or a table appeared, and the table was prepared like it was the day before. Peridie. Ita thus per 3 dies et 3 noctes praeparavit Deus prandium servis suis. Thus for 3 days and 3 nights God prepared lunch for his servants. So they're all ready to take off. They've had their meal and their rest. But in fact, God gives them food for 3 whole days. And that takes us to the end of that chapter. The next chapter will pick up where it left and finish up the character arc for the brother who is being tempted by the devil.